Welcome to the podcast, Let's Talk PWS, a series all about Prader-Willi syndrome. I'm Susi.
And I'm Katie. Let's start talking.
Good evening, listeners, and welcome to episode 9. In this episode of Let's Talk PWS, we are going to be talking about PWS Navy SEALs, a term that Katie has coined, and it's really all about intensive and complex support that's required to support someone with Prader-Willi syndrome. Do you want to just share a little bit about where that term really stems from, Katie, before we introduce our fantastic guests?
Yes, well, it actually came from when I met Michelle and Neil, and it's because it was the first time that I was in a crisis mode, and Chelsea had gone into that next phase where it becomes like a bit of a monster truck and it feels very overwhelming. So when I met Michelle and Neil and they were able to actually handle it and they had strategies around it, I said, man, you guys are like Navy SEALs. So that's what I thought, okay, so now we actually need to bring that to the sector and uplift everyone's skills, whoever works with our child, and train them up in the ways of Prader-Willi syndrome and make them fluent.
I couldn't agree more, and it brings me to a very warm welcome to Neil and Michelle from the Orange Hive. So maybe just give everyone a quick rundown of both of their extensive experience and resumes in terms of why they are so good at being Navy SEALs.
Yeah. So Michelle Alford is our first guest, and she has a Bachelor of Applied Science in Intellectual Disability, Graduate Diploma of Disability and a Diploma of Management. With a career spanning 35 years in the disability sector, Michelle has extensive experience working for government, both at a state and local level, and non-government organisations. During her time in the Department of Health and Human Services, she undertook a number of roles, including provider management, working in a funded NGO in contract management, compliance and advisor for complex service supports. Michelle returned to disability accommodation where she started her career, holding management roles focusing on redesigning services to provide individualised accommodation services to people with complex supports. During this time, Michelle designed and opened the first Prader-Willi syndrome specialised accommodation in Victoria. And that was a really huge milestone for our community, by the way, in Melbourne. Michelle provided ongoing leadership to the Health Living Home for several years before leaving her role in the department. With a passion for individualised support, she developed on an independent support coordinator. In 2024, became the founding director of the Orange Hive, a boutique provider focused on providing transition supports to people living with Prader-Willi syndrome. Michelle worked with PWS Victoria to develop and implement a mentor program, providing opportunities for teens and adults to mentor younger people living with PWS during the Time Out camp. During this time, Michelle was instrumental in advocating for an adult living with PWS to join the PWS Victoria board. Michelle provided ongoing support to the board member during his tenure. Michelle has served as a board member of PWS Australia as well. And next to her, we have Neil Gumley. So Neil began working in the disability sector in 2007 and completed a Bachelor of Applied Science at RMIT in 2010 while supporting complex behavioural accommodation services within the Department of Health and Human Services. In 2014, he provided direct leadership for Melbourne's first specialist accommodation service for adults living with PWS. Neil has served on the board of PWS Victoria for 6 years, and during this time, Neil was nominated as the Australian Caregivers Delegate for the Professional Providers Caregivers Board. During this time, he has had the honour of presenting at the Toronto, Cuba and Berlin conferences. Since 2024, Neil has also been the director of the Orange Hive, specialising in PWS complex disability support and staff training.
Okay, that's just demonstrative of just what amazing experience they have so deeply in this particular syndrome, and something I'm really learning more and more of as my daughter enters adulthood and all the challenges that we find with support workers. So what is the difference between your, say, everyday support worker, if I dare say that, and someone that's really fluent in PWS?
Well, let's to start with, first of all, thank you for those lovely bios. We sound really experienced, and that's come from a long time of actually working in this sector, being support workers as well from the start, and working with lots of different types of people with disabilities and participants throughout the journey. I guess we were discussing before, Michelle and I were saying that every support worker is a good support worker. Majority of the time, they're good support workers. And what makes a support worker is really up to depending on the person, their training that they've had, their personalities, their resilience, all those sorts of things, because there's a spectrum of disabilities out there. Prader-Willi is one of them. And within Prader-Willi, there's a spectrum of types of people who have Prader-Willi. So it really depends on the person, first of all, and also especially what training they've had, where their background, their circumstances. And it's not just, I don't want to lump support workers. You're either a Prader-Willi support worker or you're a support worker. Anyone can be a good support worker, but it's having that resilience and background and also the training as well really does help.
And I think when you talk about support workers who are really strong in working with people with PWS is they've often opted in. They've actually chosen it. And I think over our journey, there's been great support workers, but PWS isn't for them. Working with someone with Prader-Willi syndrome isn't where their strengths or passion lie. So I think, finding support workers who have a passion, who are here for the long haul, resilience, I think being able to celebrate the successes, but also get up and come back the next day when you've had a really difficult day, is something that, you create this sense for the person you're working with that we're just going to keep on coming back. And I think that is something that is a real strength of people who are working.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple of words that come into my mind consistently with supporting someone with Prader-Willi is active engagement. And at the risk of sounding a little bit cynical out there, because I've seen it a lot. But, I will say that if someone is coming in to support a Prader-Willi person 9 times out of 10, if you think you can just coast your way through, you've got another thing coming. Because, they're walking, they're talking, they've got their own view on the world and all the rest of it. So you can't just sit back and just diddle on your phone and think you're just going to have a crazy shift. That's not what it's about. But trying to, and that's brutal, but that's the reality, right? Because they want to live, they want to do their life their way. But I really think it's like the supports really need to get onto that individual's level and understand what makes them tick, what makes them happy, what makes them not go into these horrific meltdowns. So have you got any, I'd love to get some insights into what your thoughts are around that.
I think being able to be flexible and pivot, because no 2 days are ever the same when you're working with someone with PWS. And so I think being able to respond quite quickly is vitally, vitally important. I think it can sometimes be, particularly in the PWS space, a tricky space to provide maximum amount of choice and control, but also balance that with structure, routines, often there's restrictive practices. So finding that balance between, giving someone maximum amount of choice and control within a fairly structured framework, I think is a real skill. And something that needs to be developed over time. If you don't invest and make the time to build a rapport with someone with PWS, they're pretty quick to say, yeah, you're not for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, investing that time and effort to really understand someone, what drives them, and for everybody that's different.
Absolutely. There's the term in the financial institution, or the acronym NYC, Know Your Customer, and that's something that I'm sort of introducing into our world of Prader-Willi, and it's unless you deeply invest in understanding that individual, it's it's fraught with challenges, I guess. And when you say getting the supports to invest and really understanding that person, so how would you do that?
I think getting to know the person is so vitally important. Yeah. The one thing it's always worked well for me is when I'm working in an environment, I've always said I treat them like I treat my friends at the pub.
Yep.
These are individuals who are looking just to have as normal as a possible life as anyone else, highly functioning, but in their own space.
Yep.
And what their understanding is.
And sometimes that's dangerous.
It can be.
Yep.
But their world is, well, hang on, why can't I do the same as this person here? And to get to understand that and work with that is a privilege every day that we get to do that. But sometimes I think from the disability sector, we used to walk in there and you would have as a support worker, you'd have some sort of control. Here, it's not about having control. It's about working with them to support them to make mistakes and understand that mistakes will happen.
Yes.
But we dust ourselves off and we go again.
Yep.
You know, we used to, every Christmas we'd go out and we'd have a meal, but because that's what normal people do. We're trying to create a normal environment because we want some normality in their life as much as possible.
Absolutely.
And to treat them with that respect is vitally important. Not to come in with this, well, I'm the support worker and I'm in charge here. Well, no, we're there to support you as best as possible.
Yeah.
And it takes a support worker to actually understand that. And it's funny, the Irish, worked with a lot of Irish people and they just seem to get it. That laid-back attitude, but also having they're out there, they're chatty, they're trying to invest in these people's lives. They've been fantastic. And that's sort of the attitude we want to have for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I constantly say to our team that support Prada, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Change your mindset. Don't think in your lens or your view. Think of the person you're supporting's view. And as soon as you get that right, it makes your job a whole lot easier because then that drives investment and understanding of that individual, and then you can support them better, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. And just like all of us, they're all individuals.
Yes.
What they're interested in, what their passions are, what motivates them, that's different. So you need to build that rapport and understand and invest the time and effort to do that.
Yeah.
To actually really be able to support someone.
Yeah, and as much as they've got Prader-Willi individuals have got their challenges such as, intellectual impairment, psychosis, the hyperphagia, the generalised anxiety disorder, ASD, there is still capacity of brain function in there. They just do it a lot differently to what you and I would. But as soon as if they realise that you're not there and invested with them, I always say, Stephanie or Prader-Willi within Stephanie, it'll look at that support, and if there's an inch of lack of confidence or resilience, you're done. It'll just run rings around you. So that's what we've got to really overcome, and I guess that's where that term Navy SEAL really comes into, because you've got to be so resilient and dust off any of that sort of stuff hitting you.
And I guess that's why we did come up with that term. It's because you guys kind of came in and you really got into Chelsea's life, what she loved, what she was interested in. You spent that time really getting to know her. And after a few weeks, it felt like when she was with you, she felt like she was at home. And so that's how much importance we put on the kind of support that you gave. It was great to keep her safe in all of those things, in all of her things that she struggles with. But at the same time, you really wanted her to flourish in her life. So, to the point where a couple of Christmases later, she had a collection of Christmas candles and she was going to start a business. And it didn't last very long, but that was possible for her because of the amount of work and time and effort that you guys had put into her as a person, and you could tell that the real love was there. Like, it was honestly, you really did care about her, and you took care of all of the stuff that we needed help with and support with, but at the same time, your sole interest was in seeing Chelsea emerge.
The next challenge, so with personality variations across the supports and different levels of investment, let's face facts, and different nuances across family values and so forth. But how important is it, and how do you get everyone on the same page to support someone? Because consistency is key.
It's certainly not easy.
No.
Because everyone has their own individual view of what Prader-Willi is, from a parent to a support worker to a psychologist to a psychiatrist. Everyone has their own different views. I think if we pair it back to the individual, like I said before, that person who is an individual who has their own dreams, desires, needs, wants, and that we're focused on that and then getting everyone involved around moving forward to that one goal. Now, it can be difficult if you're in a group sense because we're balancing up the needs of maybe 2, 3, 4 other individuals, and then there's a different family connections, all those sorts of things. But if we're dealing with one person, for example, like Chelsea, that we focus on her individual needs and what she needs to flourish. And then we can discuss that with all the main supports around there about moving in the one direction. And it's about have a collective idea and a collective movement in a one direction. And once you start seeing even the smallest steps pay off, then we know we're moving in the right direction. And we might take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, but we're still moving in a direction together as a group. And then once everyone's on the same page, then it's a lot harder for little things to go wrong, or someone's going this direction, and then we create sort of little cracks. But if we're all moving in that one direction, it lessens that opportunity to create those cracks, and we are all on the one page, and it helps for the person so they're feeling like they're supported in the right way. They've got a box around them that's holding them up, or a scaffolding that's holding them up, and it's not going to fall apart.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look, I've said to Michelle several times, I wish we had thousands of you, really, because there is quite a cohort of Pride of Willies across Australia, and there's just not enough of trained supports. But, what is your best advice that you can give for families?
I think being well connected, build your tribe. Katie, I know, is a big one. I'm build your tribe. Build your tribe, be connected. I think start with supports early, connect and maintain connect and build that network early. So I think, having families, having, supports outside, your families, the associations that are here, knowing your resources and connecting with providers. And I think starting early, like we focus really on what we call a transition into adulthood, but really, that needs to start really early. Often we might meet people that have, gone through school and mightn't have had opportunities like school camps or sleepovers at friends, so then when you start to talk about transitioning someone to their independent home out of the family home, they haven't had those experiences. So I think starting early, I think building a strong care team. Neil talked on, supports are one part of that care team, but they're a crucial part, an absolute pivotal part, but building a really strong care team and robust care team. And I think, which is a challenge, it's absolutely a challenge, having well-trained staff and regular meetings where everybody can be on the same page. Now, that's a challenge in the current—
in its own right, yes.
In the current NDIS space, as we all know, for those things, but I think they're absolutely crucial. And connecting people, so we had a provider forum—
We did.
Last week, hosted by, which is hosted by the PWS Australia, and we did a back to basics in that. So even though everybody who was on that has been working with people with PWS for some time, it's also going back to basics. But I think connecting to those things so your supports are staying current, up to date with where things are at. The PWS world is vitally important.
So how do providers get in touch with you? Just through your website or PWSA? What's the best course?
So the provider forums are on PWSA.
Yep.
So the next one's September. And that's focusing on relationships for people with PWS, or they can via our website as well, has a link into our emails. But either way, I just think the more connected and the more resources people have.
Absolutely.
I think what Michelle just touched on earlier, starting early, it's a maybe a bit more of a newer concept because, go back 10, 15 years ago, our main focus when a child is a bit younger is, how can we turn this around and food. But now, like Michelle said, if we're exposing them to sleepovers or away from home. We're giving them opportunities so when they get to 22, 23, they're used to those experiences already. School camps, all those sorts of things. There is a tendency, fair enough, I understand it, to want to shelter. I get that. I understand that. But moving forward, when we want to see changes when they're in their late teens, early adulthood, it makes it a lot easier because they're already exposed to being away from mum and dad.
Yes.
Being away from and this is it, I get it. It is impossible, but it makes it harder the older we get when we're having to transition a 30-year-old or because they haven't had that exposure, which is
absolutely,
and that is actually completely understandable. I get it.
Yeah,
because the circumstance of it's difficult, but where you can have early exposure to those normal things, it will make it a bit easier going forward.
Absolutely. It's I just think about my own personal experiences with Stephanie and just how many times she's done STA, now STR in the NDIS space, and she's so used to going away and giving us that respite that we need to manage carer burnout and so forth. And then when we went to having her living independently, it was just, I had the vision of both my daughters would be independent young women at a very early age, 18 and 20. And I was just surprised with Stephanie that she just, when she moved out, it was, I was mourning the loss of what just happened. 18 years went past so quickly, but she's living independently now. Yes, she's got a lot of challenges with that whole construct and the modelling of the supports and so forth, but it was just literally mum who, so that's good. And, whilst I always get concerned every time something goes wrong, sadly we're now up to provider number 3, but I think the provider we've got now, I'm really hopeful that will be long-term, and that's absolutely what we want, consistency, long-term relationships, to get her that stability.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this episode was to lay a foundation for the next 3 episodes, and we're going to start to delve into effective PWS support. And in your decades of experience, what are the 3 pillars? What are the 3 main big things, or the 3 consistent things that you see right throughout? And so, stay tuned for the next 3 episodes on those effective PWS supports. So part 1 will be food security, part 2 is routine, and part 3 is consistency and reliability. So we'll see you back here soon.
Thanks.
As we close tonight, don't forget to sign up as members at pws.org.au, where you'll also find ways to donate and sponsor our various projects and initiatives. Please remember to like, follow and share us on our socials. And until next week, let's keep talking.